Blue political roundup, another person linked to the Trump administration is refusing to appear before Congress. John Gore, the current principal deputy attorney general, becomes the third person this week to say he will ignore a subpoena by House Democrats. He joins Carl Klein, the former White House personnel security director. Klein was instructed by the administration not to testify regarding security clearances. The president also says he will fight Don McGahn's subpoena. The former counsel to the president was asked to appear after his name was found over 150 times in special counsel Robert Mueller's findings. The lack of compliance comes as the president intensifies the fight surrounding that report. Mr. Trump told the Washington Post this week both current and former staffers should not testify on Capitol Hill. He argues his office cooperated fully with Mueller. Therefore, there is no reason to go any further. However, House Oversight Committee Chairman Elijah Cummings had a much different view Wednesday.
It's impossible to make the president accountable if we cannot have access to information and if we cannot have access to witnesses. He is blocking all flows of information and witnesses. And so we are at a point where we as Democrats have got to make a decision. We cannot afford to allow our president to be above the law.
Jeff Mason joins me now. He's a White House correspondent for Reuters. Jeff, White House counselor Kellyanne Conway said Wednesday the administration is even considering invoking executive privilege to prevent McGahn from testifying before Congress. Let's take a listen.
Executive privilege is on the table. Executive privilege is on the table. That's his right.
And
there's a reason that our democracy and our constitutional government allows for that.
How would this intensify the power struggle between the Trump administration and congressional Democrats?
Well, it would intensify it completely. I mean, number one, it would be a shift from what the White House has actually done during the Mueller investigation, which was it did offer cooperation. Obviously, the fact that McGahn was able to testify for as many hours as he did show cooperation on the part of the White House. But now, getting him, there's a difference between having him speak behind closed doors, as it were, with the investigators versus speaking to members of Congress in perhaps a public or televised way. And the president is clearly upset with some of the things that McGahn said during that testimony, and he doesn't want that to become a storyline going forward. The Democrats see it exactly the opposite. They say that they need more information from McGahn. They want to bring him up for testimony. And to go back to your original question, this is just going to intensify the clash between the two sides.
The president's 2020 advisors are in the battleground state of Pennsylvania Wednesday. If the Trump administration doesn't comply with Congress, it's going to be very difficult to have a successful legislation record to run on. Is the White House worried this could pose problems for the next election?
Well, you know, I think there are two schools of thought about it, actually. I think on one hand, the White House thinks that if Democrats keep pushing for further investigations and sort of focusing on the Mueller report and the Mueller controversy, that may actually help Republicans in some ways by suggesting, or at least this is what the White House would suggest, that the Democrats are more focused on that and less on doing legislation or working on policy that Americans care about. On the other hand, there were a lot of unflattering things in the Mueller report about President Trump. And certainly if that does sort of stay alive in the public consciousness because of the Democrats' efforts to continue investigations, that could have an impact on some independent voters who find it distasteful.
Jeff, we know the president is expected to meet with House Speaker Nancy Pelosi next week. It was scheduled so the two could discuss infrastructure. With everything going on, can we expect that meeting to still happen?
Well, yes, I think so. I mean, we haven't gotten any indication that meeting is not going to happen. I mean, everything that's going on was going on last week as well. So, yeah, as far as I know, that meeting will still happen. Whether or not it focuses entirely or exclusively on infrastructure or whether it maybe deviates into some of these other issues, I guess we'll find out next week.
Going to the border, sticking with House Democrats, lawyers for the chamber asked a judge late Tuesday to halt funding for the president's border wall. The House's 56-page motion does not dispute the national emergency declaration, however. What's the strategy behind that?
Well, I think number one, they just want to get this in front of a judge, and they want the judge to say, hey, you can't do this. The Democrats obviously have objected to the president's strategy on this, and they want to be sure that there are some guardrails here to going around Congress.
Switching gears, the president's latest pick for a seat on the Federal Reserve Board is under scrutiny. Stephen Moore is facing criticism for writings of his considered to be insulting to women. Have any lawmakers weighed in on whether or not Moore is expected to be confirmed?
Well, lawmakers started out by weighing in on Herman Cain, and he was the other man that President Trump was considering nominating to the Federal Reserve Board, and Cain ended up pulling his own nomination or saying that he wouldn't stand, and the president deciding then not to nominate him because of the controversy over some of his allegations of his misconduct with women and his readiness for the Federal Reserve Board in general. This now, with Stephen Moore, this is another candidate who is coming under scrutiny. I can't tell you what some of the lawmakers' responses have been on that. I know that Senator Murkowski has said that she's still in the vetting stage. Probably that speaks for a number of her colleagues. So that's just something we're going to have to wait and see. But Democrats have been critical of both of those nominees, and in general, it would be a blow to the president if both of them end up having to be pulled back.
Lastly, former Vice President Joe Biden is expected to announce his presidential campaign Thursday. The race for the Democratic nomination is already well underway. Does Biden's late entrance hurt his chances with voters who are already getting to know other candidates?
Well, it seems late because so many other candidates are already in the race, but it's actually it's still April, right? It's April of 2019. So, the election, the general election is not till November of next year. The primary process is obviously already heating up, but the first caucuses and primary races, or votes rather, don't occur until next year. So I don't think it's going to hurt him that he started late. I mean, I think the fact that somebody who, like Vice President Biden, who's been at the top of the polls without actually having officially announced, suggests that he had as much time as he needed. But now that he is going to get in, what will be curious to watch, I think, as political observers, is to see whether those polls shift at all. He will start being scrutinized even more as an actual candidate. He'll start speaking more to the press and in other, in other venues. So we'll see whether that impacts how viewers, or how voters rather, view him, and whether that ends up pushing his poll numbers higher, or whether some of the other competitors who have been in the race a little bit longer end up gaining some traction.
No doubt it will be an interesting and lively year and a half until the 2020 election. Jeff Mason, thank you very much.
Indeed it will.